I'm going to invite Jasmine now to speak. And as with last week, she has to leave and go to work when she's done, and I'll then do our healing meditation. Adjust the screen so that you can see yourself more clearly if you want.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I've decided that I'm going to try to snooker you all a little bit, but I'm letting you in on the joke. Last week, I spoke on a topic that I think may have been difficult to hear about. So this morning, I'm going to begin by saying, good morning and welcome to Jasmine's Cheerful Chat. Okay, but you're in on the joke, so it probably won't work very well. I just found, laying on Carol's dining table, a newsletter from the Friends Committee on National Legislation, which, as you can imagine, is a Quaker organization. And I like this sentiment a lot, so this is going to be our sacred text for this morning. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. And the important words here, well, they're all important, but I like substance and evidence, because being in our corporal state as physical beings, we like things that we can get hold of and see and hear and quantify. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. I'm going to reach for my cup of tea and move the clock. Oh, we're good. Thank you, Carol. Okay, so where I got started last week and the message that I wanted to bring to you seemed to be about the police. And as I hope that I began to deconstruct for us all, focus on the police as the problem is really scapegoating an organization that we've created. And I have no great reason to defend the police per se. I just want us to understand our responsibility in this situation. And certainly within any given police department, there are good people and so-called bad people, but the whole construct is one that we have created in order to they're the buffer between us and the people and situations and social situations that we really don't want to have to be aware of and don't want to have to deal with. I mentioned last week that I had coincidentally begun to watch a police drama called Chicago PD, and it's well done. I like the characters. But here's something that occurred to me as I have been watching it. In one of the recent segments that I saw, an officer says to his superior, well, aren't we supposed to be making the world a better place? And the quote unquote superior officer, who has many more years of experience, says, son, you can either be a cop or you can be a realist. You can't be both. Or excuse me, not realist, idealist. You can either be a cop or an idealist. You can't be both, which is, given the status quo, is certainly true. Because what occurred to me is the police are not charged with improving things. They respond, for the most part. They respond, they react to situations. They try to, we have the war on drugs, which has been absolutely pointless, because as long as there's a market, as long as there's a demand for anything, there's going to be a supply of it. So if the police, with their powers, are not charged with making the world a better place, who is? Yes, we have some social organizations. There's sort of a social network. We have public assistance, we have social workers, but all of those are still driven by the by our white privilege. And as I said last week, I'm going to go ahead and speak in sweeping terms. It's not my intent to offend you, but I need to speak specifically, to get to my points here. And so, very briefly, many of us know that white social workers for years took children out of Native families because white values and beliefs were imposed on Indigenous cultures. There was an apparent clash, and because the white social workers had more power than did the Indigenous sovereign people, their children were taken away. And until recently, those children were not placed in, there was not an effort to place children in other Native homes. They were put wherever room could be found for them. That, of course, causes pain and trauma to that individual family. It tears a hole in the culture. To say that it's not helpful is a horrible understatement. The fact that we accept crime as a given is an inescapable reality, and it is time for us to accept our responsibility for the things that our privilege has created or perpetuated: poverty, racism, oppression, and all the other ugly things that contribute to crime in our society. And it occurred to me a couple of days ago when I was thinking about this morning's talk that a huge source of problems in our culture is judgment. I think that most of us from the time we were children or even in utero learned to be judgmental. I know that I certainly did. I had a perfectionist parent, and being a perfectionist is all about judging that other people, other things are wrong, bad, insufficient, whatever. And so I learned then from my father, whom I loved dearly, to be a perfectionist, which means to be judgmental. And I've been spending many years unlearning that stuff. And I'm not there yet. I'm a work in progress, as I assume we all are. But going back for centuries, for millennia, in the Old Testament, we had a vengeful God. We did not have a God who said, you're cool no matter what. You're awesome no matter what. We had a vengeful God that said, look at me sideways and I will smite you. Slight exaggeration, maybe. I'm not sure. I was going to say I wasn't there, but I'm not sure. Sitting in judgment of people gives those who want power a great deal of power. Excuse me 1 second. Let's see, it would have been probably, I didn't look this up, maybe the early 1800s. An author whose name was Nathaniel Hawthorne wrote a book called The Scarlet Letter. And in The Scarlet Letter, the main character was a woman named Hester Prynne. And it took place, in early America. Hester Prynne was married. Her husband was away legitimately. I don't know if he was at war or at, on a sailing ship or whatever. But suddenly she was obviously pregnant, and her husband had been gone longer than it would have been possible for him to be the father of the child that she is carrying. And the pastor in their town comes down on her like a ton of bricks. She's awful, she's wicked, she's a terrible person. He requires her to wear a scarlet letter A on her dress, so that to remind her and to remind anyone who sees her that she is an adulteress. And she is to be, she still lives in the community, but she is to be essentially shunned. She's cut off from all other human interaction. She has no support. Well, guess what? We learn as we read the book that the pastor is the father of the child. But he had the power to do terrible things to her life and to make her feel terribly about herself. When we judge other people, what we are saying to them is that you are so offensive in the ways in which you are different, or the ways in which I label you to be bad. You are so offensive that you are unlovable. And as you can imagine, this is a huge contributor to the despair that people feel that leads them to commit crimes. Whether it's, and I, I personally think that a great deal of the drug abuse that is, going on in our culture today is caused by people who are seeking to, they're self-medicating. They're trying to, in some way, alleviate the pain that they are feeling. And yes, we create barriers between us and what we find to be offensive. So that's another way that we can look at, police forces. Here we are in our belief in white supremacy. Here's the police force, which provides a buffer between us and the crime committed by those other people. Okay, so it's time to become proactive. What do we do about all this? I'm not about to open wounds, so to speak, and then just leave you with them. That to me would be a cop-out, but I need more tea to fortify myself. 1 second, please. I assume this happens to all of us. Every once in a while, I'll get, a little message in my head, and it's not words per se. It's not like somebody speaking in my ear, but the thought, the concept, whatever is here. And I have learned to understand that if I'm willing to be open to noticing it and accepting it and incorporating it, that's certainly a message from the divine for me. That's the connection between myself and the divine. And so to me, that little voice, when I hear it, is inspiration. Carol, could I have a tissue, please? Oh, wait a minute, I got one in my pocket.
Oh, I got it.
Because I think I'm gonna need it here. I know when I'm gonna tear up. And this is what occurred to me. Thank you. This is what occurred to me. Drum roll, please. In our culture, there's a very apt statement called, and we say we're rushing to judgment, and certainly we do. And I'm going to sidetrack here for a minute because, as I've said, even though I'm aware of it, I still do this stuff all the time. This morning, I was coming up the avenue that Carol lives on, and there's a four-way stop there. And as I'm sitting at my stop sign wanting to turn right, a small four-door vehicle is backing down the avenue and onto the street next to me. I mean, it could not have been more illegal, not to mention dangerous. And I had to swerve a little bit so that she didn't back into me. And the only thing I can imagine is that she might have discovered that there was only parking on the opposite side of the street. Anyway, as she was backing then around the corner, she glanced over at me and smiled at me. Now, I'm sure that smile meant, thank you for putting up with my inadvisable maneuver. But it was a woman probably about my age, and as she smiled at me, I realized that I was scowling at her. Instant judgment, rush to judgment. Look at her doing something wrong, bad, stupid, dangerous. And instead and as I drove away, I thought, well, I've done some pretty knuckleheaded things in my time, and people have smiled at me. I need to learn to be in that space more. And I hope this is a reminder for you as well. So getting to the reason for the drum roll. What finally occurred to me is that instead of rushing to judgment, my phrase is that we need to hurry to help people. We need to learn to interpret every misstep as a cry for help, which it really is. So instead of judging someone, charging them with a crime, incarcerating them, et cetera, we need to recognize what they've done as a cry for help. And whether that is drug abuse, bank robbery, sexual assault, we need to respond immediately and appropriately. And of course, we're going to keep people safe, but we need a paradigm shift in terms of how we look at crime, especially crime. I think you see my finger quotes here, especially crime as we perceive it being committed by people of color. And so let's say that there's a young African-American man who tries to hold up the neighborhood gas station, and he's picked up. And normally he might, be tried for, this crime and be put in prison, which of course is only going to make his life worse. What I would like to see us doing is I'd like to see some program or system in place that would immediately step in and take him in and find out what he needs to get on the right track. Does he need assistance with literacy? Does he need a place to live? Does he need money for food? Does he need drug abuse treatment? And I think that a huge problem in a lot of folks who we do see committing crimes is self-esteem issues. If they grew up in an environment, or since they grew up in an environment where the white, at least power majority, that the message is always you are not good enough, then there are probably self-esteem issues. And when people have self-esteem issues, there's often a cascade of problems that may end up in crime. So for every person who stumbles, we are waiting to help them get up and move forward with more assurance and more joy and more understanding that they are absolutely fine, that they are a child of God, just like the rest of us. And so anyone who stumbles, and I kind of want to take this out of the realm of crime because that in itself is damning and judging. For anyone who stumbles, there's going to be someone or a group of someone's there to rush in and say, how did this happen? What do you need so that it doesn't happen again? What do you need so that you can be happier and more fulfilled? And two other places that we need to look: people who have already been incarcerated, who are in jail now, or who have served time and gotten out. One of the reasons that our prison system is pretty much useless, as far as I'm concerned, is there's no training, there's no rehabilitation. People go in, serve their time. It's absolutely Old Testament. You're wrong, you're bad, boom, we're going to put you in jail. They could have been put in the stocks in the Middle Ages. They could have been whipped, whatever, other awful things. Those folks who are serving time or have served time get remedial treatment. So we go to some people in prison and say, hey, this may be hard to believe, but we want to make your lives better. And this can be a way of making amends for what has happened to these people. Offer them all kinds of training, therapy. And I don't have this all figured out yet. So if someone refuses therapy, I don't know what we do with them. I suppose that we could make access to other programs, contingent on willing to go to therapy, but that's manipulative in a way. So don't have all this figured out yet, but we can work on that together. And then the third group, of course, is children. And there's a duplex next door to me that I've talked about a few times. It used to be owner owned, and then that gentleman passed away past couple of years. There's a new absentee owner with whom I've had words. And the young woman who lived upstairs for about a year needs or needed help. There was a lot of yelling in that house. It felt chaotic to me. And again, I'm acknowledging those were my values. I live in a quiet house. This was a very loud house. But I knew the kids. There were 3 little kids, and then 2 foster children. So there were a lot of children in that house. That young woman needed a lot of support that she was not getting. She appeared to be living on public assistance. I don't believe she worked. In a situation like that, we want to go to her or anyone in her situation lovingly. We don't want to alienate people and make them feel worse about the situation they're in. So whatever system that we create to address issues like this, it has to absolutely be based on love and acceptance and open arms. So we would, hopefully our reputation will have preceded us, and we would go to this young woman's home and say, hi, we're, and this is what we can offer you. And in addition to that, what do you need? Maybe she needed respite care 1 day a week. Maybe on another day of the week, she needed help learning how to apply to the local junior college so that she could get, if maybe she needed her GED, maybe she wanted an AA degree so that as her children were growing up, she could move on into something more meaningful. Maybe she needed more money, a couple of times a year for food, snow boots, whatever the case might be. We're going to learn what people in different situations are most likely to need. We're going to offer it to them, and we're going to have the funding ready. And I realize that I'm suggesting a paradigm shift, because we need to effectively do this. We're probably going to need a ton of money, at least at first. And that means changing bureaucracies. And bureaucracies, let me tell you, bureaucracies do not like to change. Bureaucracies are kind of like glaciers. It's a little hard to get through to them. But very often, I think grassroots movements are the ones that have the most power, because they are, again, in a patriarchal, hierarchical sense. Grassroots movements are from the ground up, not from the top down. But I think most of us like having our own ideas and doing things rather than being told what to do. I don't do well when I'm told what to do, and I'm aware of that, and it's something that I have to deal with occasionally. So we will be making amends for neglect. And by the way, the young woman who lived next door to me, she has since moved. She was Caucasian, like me. This was not a matter of race. This was a matter of class. And of course, people who get locked into poverty are also oppressed. Okay, and so then, of course, the very last piece of this is, of course, the children themselves. And in the early 90s, when I was married and living in St. Paul, there was a woman named Ann Winia who was running for, I believe, the US Senate. And one of the strongest planks in her platform, political platform, was getting children ready for school. Children before the age of 5 or 6. So again, whether that was food, better living conditions, medical care, whatever it was, she was really big on that. And I remember my ex-husband saying, well, doesn't she realize that not everybody cares about spending a lot of money on that sort of thing? We don't have kids. And I said, but dude, dude, aside from the fact that having healthy children is going to make the world a better place, those are the little people who are going to be taking care of us as we get older. And I don't just mean, like in a nursing home sense. I mean, those are the people who are going to be running the world in 20, 30, 40 years. So, and aside from that, I think it is our society's duty to take care of children of all varieties. So we would be coming at this from all fronts, but all of it based on love. Helping people who've committed crimes, people who've already been incarcerated, parents who need more support to raise healthy children, and then finding out what the kids need. Little things. I started wearing glasses before I went to school. And does anybody know that little kid acts differently or seems not bright enough because they need glasses, not because there's anything intrinsically wrong? So all that good stuff. So to go back to the police, because this is the circle. And once again, I need fortification. I don't believe in coincidence. There isn't any in my life. I'm assuming there isn't any in anyone's life. There are just sometimes confusing situations that we don't have a context for. I think that all of the ugliness that occurred this summer happened absolutely on time, in God's time, in God's plan. And since we are part of that beautiful circle of divinity, it's the perfect time for all of us. And things come up in order to be dealt with, not swept under the rug. Do we need reformation of police departments? Certainly. But we need to keep in mind that police departments, as they have existed, have been part of a very, very oppressive system. And we can't change just the police. We have to change ourselves. We have to change our society. Otherwise, we're just riding around in the same circle, and no one benefits at all, except the status quo is maintained until the status quo is really blown up, knocked apart. And I would like to hope that there is a more peaceful and loving approach to changing the status quo to a culture that is equitable and caring and promotes the possibility for people to become who and what they want. Self-actualization for all. That should really be somebody's presidential platform. Make a great bumper sticker, self-actualization for all. And so, as I conclude, I have two things I want to leave you with. Something that occurred to me this morning as I was typing up my notes. I lovingly suggest that we all remember that judging anyone helps no one. This morning, when I judged the woman who was backing around the corner onto a street, granted, not a good choice, but I did not need to rush to judgment. And so doing so didn't help me, didn't help her. And by association, the power of vibes throughout the world, the transitive power of vibes throughout the world, I helped no one. And so I'm here saying this to you, not because I'm guilty. I'm no more human and no less human than all of us. But it's easy to use myself as an example. And it's a good reminder. And I don't feel shamed or bad or stupid for sharing this. We all need reminders. Good heavens, we all need reminders. Last week I mentioned that you were going to hear some cliches because cliches carry a lot of power. That's why they exist. That's why they stay around. And so what I want to leave you with today, dear friends, is this. We all do better when we all do better. And so it is, and amen. Thank you. Thank you for coming today to Jasmine's Cheerful Chat.
Thank you to Jasmine for sharing her passion. I'm going to invite you all to take a breath, and we're going to change gears just a tiny bit to do a meditation. If you would get centered where you're sitting or lying down, some of you might be stretched out. Get centered and comfortable wherever you are. Let the seat, the floor, wherever you're positioned, let that support you, hold you. Close your eyes, if you will. Breathe deeply. And let yourself fall into this support. Breathe into your heart mind, into the center of your being. And listen, look around what you may perceive there. Is it silence? Is it some sort of beautiful music? Is it a soft, loving voice? Are you seeing lights, colors? This is a place where God rests in you and where you rest in God. And I'm going to invite you from that place to envision our planet. Embraced in the light and the love that are the substance of God. That hold and fill everything and everyone on the planet. All is light, all is love, all is God. And bring your attention more closely focused to our country. At this human level, it seems to me we are actually in a sort of civil war. Red versus blue instead of north versus south. And there are places where it has become very violent. There are places where it threatens to be. And only we can change that. Not by fighting in the war, but by rising above it and seeing the whole country and everyone in it as part of that light and love that is the oneness of all. It's a huge challenge to not get caught up in the drama. And yet, for the sake of all, we need to let ourselves be above it, seeing, affirming the oneness. Every one of us here has a spiritual path to which we're committed and which we follow. And every one of us in those paths, I suspect, focuses on light and love in some time, in some way. And to go to cliches again, as Jasmine did, we can be part of the problem or part of the solution. The problem is to get caught in the drama. The solution is to rise above it and know that we're really all one. Judging and attacking help no one. Loving and trusting in divine order. And being open to a different perception, a different experience. Are our way home. So, if you will just see the light, embracing and infusing all of our country, everyone involved in the process of the coming election, of the process of dealing with racism, the pandemic, economics, all of the ills that we see at the physical human level. And know that every one of us has the same amount of God within us. And every one of us is doing the best we can with what we have from where we are. And some of us got a lot more starting out than others, as Jasmine pointed out. And at the very least, to be compassionate for those who seem to be lacking the love and the peace that we want for all. And breathe into the peace, into the God center within you. And with each breath, feel the whole country, the whole planet breathing with you. We are all breathing into the love, the light, the peace that is beyond breath. There is only God. There is only love. There is only one. It's safe to let go and trust. And as you're ready, breathe back into opening your eyes and being in this place.